Well, let's call this meeting to order. Bailey, can you note roll call, or take roll call, I guess?
Commissioner Lorge.
Here.
Commissioner Husnick. Commissioner Huntash.
Here.
Mayor Winnick.
Here.
Commissioner Roberts. Commissioner Finneman.
Here.
Commissioner Archer.
Here. All right, thank you. I ask everybody to rise for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I will look for a approval of the agenda.
I
Or
move that we
changes to-
approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And look for approval of the minutes from June 11th.
So moved.
Do we have a second on that?
Well, second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, that brings us to item number 6, work plan finalization. Chris, are you gonna, or I didn't know who was gonna do it.
I'll start it out. President, members of the EDA, we have here before us kind of the final packaged version of the economic development work plan for 2018 to 2020. We, last meeting, completed the SWOT analysis, and that's what was discussed at that meeting is summarized on page 7 of the packet under the opportunities and challenges portion of the plan. We're basically at this point just kind of looking at, is there any final feedback we want included in the plan, anything that we missed before we can get, the plan approved and actually start working on implementing some of the action steps that are included in the plan. If you look under item number 4, there is still a deliverable that needed more details, which is the action step. It's a deliverable for the action step, the types of businesses that the city is trying to attract for a new business park. Just want to know if there's any specific action step that the EDA would like included in that one. That's one of the areas, and there's also an additional one just on number 6. We'll strike that, needs more details there on the final plan for the deliverable for under the Workforce Summit. But at this point, it's basically, this is kind of the final cleanup of the work plan before we get it. Hopefully, EDA makes a motion tonight to approve the work plan. Then we can actually kind of start working on getting some of these action steps taken care of.
All right, thank you, Dan. Chris, did you have any input or anything to?
President Winnick and members of the EDA, just and thank you for letting me be part of the process. It was really interesting and it was good to work with you on it. Looking forward to helping you implement it, so feel free to reach out, and looking forward to working closely with Dan to get going on the action items and deliverables. So continuing to work with you going forward. So thank you again. I'll stand for any questions if you have any.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do we set up then as an actual agenda item? We then we'll take one and we'll put it on the agenda and we'll talk about it and work it? Is that how we're going to move forward on these particular items?
President Winnick and members of the EDA, that's a great question. We do want to periodically give you feedback, but individually at certain meetings and maybe at workshops as well, we'll maybe dive down a little bit deeper and see which of those action items you want us to take on at any given time. But just know that Dan and I will be continuing to work on those in the background, and we'll have those discussions as we move forward.
So I guess where I thought was we were going to discuss this tonight and basically have a vote, yes or no, this is going down the path we want to see.
That was our hope as well. So, but certainly feel free to give us any feedback if you'd like, and we can make any amendments to it.
I guess a clarification for me as people look at this, the goals, say the goals 1 through 7, I don't think those are in any type of priority. And I would like to highlight that they are not prioritized, but these are all goals we've identified.
President Winnick, yes, that's correct.
So to read this, how we're actually going to proceed, there will be, when you're ready to talk about a particular item, it'll come on the agenda, and we'll know fully that we're gonna be speaking about
Yes.
that particular item.
Yep.
And just to point, another point of clarification, like if you look at one of the items was number 2, promote downtown revitalization. Well, there was that a downtown revitalization plan that the EDA passed and the council passed a couple of years ago. Well, if you look further down the agenda, that's actually back forward as a discussion item, just to get the EDA familiar with it. So this plan kind of brought that off the back burner, kind of pushed it back onto the forefront. So that's kind of the intent too, is just to kind of guide economic development activity. So some of those projects or plans that were started years ago that may have kind of fallen off are now kind of getting back on, but there is the intent to kind of keep the EDA, kind of keep that in the front of the EDA's brain, as they go out into the community, they have those details readily available.
No, I'm assuming this is also gonna be kind of an evolving document as we move forward, so the 7 goals listed, the EDA may choose to add 1 or 2 to it, or say, yes, we've had a workforce summit, let's take that off the list type of thing, so.
Yes, that's correct. And we can amend it every year. Maybe at your annual meeting, you take a look at it and say, are these things still important to us? Or are there things that you'd like to add or take off of that list? But yeah, it should be a living, breathing document that we will continue to use as a way to measure success and to come back and say, here's what we've accomplished.
All right, thank
Well,
you.
my hope is that we drive this forward, that
We
it
will.
doesn't
Yes.
slow down. I have one question. I probably should know this, but we've talked in the past about a $40,000 investment. We'll support that with a $5,000. We have a budget set aside for that, so much per year for certain qualifications. How does that differ, or doesn't it differ from the tax abatement proposition? That's again $5,000. It's an we abate their taxes, or are we using abated taxes to pay from our budget? How are we doing this?
I believe that 5,000 would come out of the EDA's budget because the city would lose the 5,000 in tax revenue from the abatement, so that would come out and
So it is the same program?
Yep.
There is no distinction here?
the same program.
Okay. So
But
the,
I think a tax abatement in general can be any amount. I mean, we're listing this program up to 5,000. And,
Correct.
that's, I guess we've already established parameters for this 5,000, so it's a program that's out there and available. If somebody were to approach and say, I need a tax abatement for something, there's a whole process they would have to go through for that. It wouldn't be nearly as quick and
but
easy
these
as
can
this
be
would be.
separate items,
Correct, yep.
but they could as well be assumed to be the same because you're going to tap the EDA funds to cover the abated taxes.
Right.
So before the abatement happens or anything comes of that, we're gonna front the money from the EDA, or we just wait until it all happens when the abatement kind of shows up on the table. Anyway, there's the timing thing that, wins the money out. But the other thing was just separating those two. I wasn't sure if they were separate. Sounds like we can certainly do a tax abatement as a whole new category in some other fashion with qualified people and under different parameters.
I don't think we can do a tax abatement, the council could, but the EDA wouldn't be able to.
Okay, well, we should think about how we bring ideas forward, and that might be one of the things in the future we do, promote a particular effort to the city council regarding tax abatement.
All right. Any other questions, concerns with our goals or anything else in the document?
I have nothing else.
So, Dan, I guess, are we then going to be attaching onto this, like, more, when you and Chris are working, that'll be attached to that? Will that come back then to EDA for review and approval, or how does that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that this kind of would evolve as a document would be, if we if we hit like a certain bullet point or hit a certain goal in terms of one of the plans, we would do it as an update saying, in Q1, we accomplished, under step 4, we did 3 items. We, signed up whatever business or made some move towards establishing what businesses we were looking to try to attract. Whatever that marker is, there would be an update that shows that, then we can kind of just build on that list until that goal, and then we can kind of make, do we meet that goal or not? And, again, that's part of the evolution of it, but we would be bringing back forward summaries of what the work has been done to those as well, to those individual items that are on the plan.
Okay. And like our current downtown well, I guess we got that on the agenda later. I was just gonna clarify, I'll wait till that comes up. We'll go through that afterwards anyway.
Well, the challenge in all these steps is, challenging time is now, the next proposition. We've got our list, but the strategy that goes behind each one of these is something that needs to be discussed.
Now, is there a way we can kind of get this embedded into the EDA's yearly? So like at the goal setting session, we review the plan, approve it for another year, or make changes?
Yep, absolutely. I think this would be a document that gets reviewed. I think the more frequently this document gets reviewed and updated, the better it's going to be. Otherwise, it just kind of becomes one of those, a lot of effort goes into creating a plan that just sits on a shelf. I see this more as a document that helps to guide just overall activity in terms of like what goes on the agenda, kind of helps set like a loose framework for a year's worth of EDA work. But then certain things are obviously going to require a little bit additional dive, so they may stay on the plan for a couple of years. Other ones could be easy, like the Workforce Summit, that just should be accomplished this fall. That gets accomplished, and that gets moved off into the completed file. So the goal will be you take it off the active and you kind of put it on what's been completed. So at a certain point in time, you can look back and say, over the last 36 months, the EDA accomplished all these, checked all these boxes in terms of what was been done, and shows the value that the group is bringing.
Now, will this, are we gonna post this on the city's website someplace for reference?
Yep, I think once it's finalized, we can definitely get it up there, because it kind of shows that there is a plan in place here, and, that we do have some, goals to hit, and we're trying to make some progress in economic development in the city of Forest Lake.
And Chris, I guess is in your travels and experiences with other communities, have you seen many EDAs or HRAs with a completed plan like this, or?
So President Winnick, the CDA has a very similar document. In fact, the format is almost identical to what we use with our communities within the county. And we do report back to that what we have that meets quarterly is the Economic Development Work Group. And that's kind of what the EDA board does. So you'll check off those things as a CDA board and the ED work group here about all of the accomplishments that happen. Some cities have more fluid work plans where they'll just react to the opportunities that are in front of them, and some cities are very detailed and actually have a 3-year plan that they'll work closely with. So there's no real wrong way to do this, but there's a lot of variety out there, and I think this is a pretty good plan. Just so you know, I think we're going to be working with the city of Hugo on a very similar document probably in the not too distant future. So you guys are kind of leading the way, and I think other communities will look at doing something very similar here coming up in the future.
All right, well, thank you very much.
I've got a question. Take, for example, number 3, inventory community assets. Who is actually going to do that work? Under action step. Just for my own edification, who's doing it? Are we doing it as a work group? Are employees of the city doing it? Who's doing it?
I guess that's why the tangible forward motion
Putting names on who's
is
doing what.
really tagging people for actual work effort, I would imagine. At least
Yeah,
that's
'cause
how I
this-
think of it.
Yeah, could slide forward and forward and forward, so who is doing it? I mean, do we have a plan for assigning tasks?
I mean, I think at this point, some of these are, we've been focusing primarily on developing the steps, and the action points, like the actual assignment, has yet to be determined. I mean, some of them are, I've been able to kind of go back through and find some of those old documents and bring those forward, but for something like that could be something where, now if it's on the approved work plan and we have a staff member who has some available capacity, say it's a seasonal employee that, is looking to get an economic development, or an intern that's doing some zoning work, this could be a good project for them to take on. But some of this at this point, I can't say. We don't have a specific person in mind, or like this will be done in 3 months. This is kind of, we've been focusing on the very high level kind of stuff, and now we'll start to get down to those next level details and start looking at where does capacity exist and where can we kind of plug these things into that existing capacity to get them completed.
It seem like I'm jumping, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Does it seem like what we're trying to do is assign subgroups within this primary group to actually start to take on tasks and be tied to the idea of getting something forward motion wise?
President Wynn, if I could just add briefly, Dan is absolutely right, but these are topics for upcoming workshops. So when the EDA has another workshop in a month or two, we'll put this on the agenda, and we'll, as a group, identify what those community assets are. We did begin that process at the last workshop, where we listed out the strengths and opportunities. And so we've started that list, but of course, there's a lot of work that could be done to it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, Dan and I will work closely with you to develop that list, and that becomes our marketing campaign going forward. So those will be topics that will, including the tax abatement, how does it work? I just added that to my list of a future workshop that we'll continue to talk about and get your input as we go.
I think kind of what I'm looking for is, I think everybody's looking at some kind of accountability. If we're saying we're gonna begin in the third quarter, where's that accountability come in that we're gonna reach that? Because I'm seeing on most of these, beginning third quarter 2018, and that's next week, so, I think we gotta have some kind of accountability and start honing in on, what month are we gonna do it, and then what day, so. That would be my ask, is that we hold each other accountable to make sure that we're at least hitting the deliverable timeframes. Whether it's fully developed or not, I mean, we gotta do something, because something is better than nothing, so.
I appreciate that. So, I guess next step, do we have a motion and approve what we have here, or if anybody has changes to the document they'd like to see at this point?
I would move to approve the core outline nature of it, and then maybe there is just simply the format of action that we will figure out over time.
Sounds good.
And I'll second that we approve the core ideas here.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Well, I would like us to set a timeline right now for when we expect to have a name and a date attached to these things. So can it be on our next workshop agenda, which is?
Well, from my understanding, the discussion was Chris and Dan would have to take a couple of steps in between before the document's really
So
ready
then
to
they need to
bring
be
that
able to
back to
tell
us.
us, to give us an idea of when we can expect that to be
Right.
done.
I don't think our next meeting is gonna give them adequate amount of time for that, especially with holidays in between, but definitely we'll need, we can keep this on the agenda as a checkup for the next meeting to, just a short progress report, and, I think by that time we'll be able to get a feel for a developable timeframe that's realistic without, pushing everybody to the limit anyway. It's been very busy over City Hall here lately. Go ahead, Mr. Ing.
President Winnick and members, if I could just add too, you'll see some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, including the Washington County CDA grant. We're going to talk about the business park development program and then downtown business redevelopment district. So some of the things that were identified in the plan, and keep in mind that the plan is really kind of a roadmap. It's where we want to go. It doesn't include every stop along the way, but we'll continue to work with you at those workshops and make sure that we fill in the stops. But so we're already, even though we haven't formally adopted the plan, we're already moving in that direction by some of the discussion items, and we'll continue doing that as we go forward.
Well, and just a suggestion, I don't know if we can alter this document a little bit, but if we could just add a bullet point onto the front of each one with a different color, if we've addressed it, we're working on it, or, kind of an A, B, and C priority level. So as we scroll through it, or as we look at it, we can see those getting into the attain column anyway.
Kind of like a 30,000-foot view, just kind of.
And one thing to that point too, one thing on future agendas, I could always go back to, and if a certain topic is on there that's relating back to a certain portion of this work plan, is just mark it on the agenda saying this relates back to the buy local campaign, this relates back to that. Because a lot of the work that's now on the agenda, the subsequent items were discussed later on, were directly a result of some of these conversations that were here. I just didn't classify them on the agenda because,
I like that idea.
at least now you can just say parentheses, whatever color coded, whatever classification system we use, so that way you can see how it ties in, or if new things are coming in that aren't hitting these work plans, then we may need to adjust to add those specific titles or a new item to the work plan to get those included in it.
Sounds good. All right, well, we have a motion and a second. Not hearing any further discussion. All those in favor of adopting the plan as a general overview and continuing the discussion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed and abstained. All right, motion carries. So, small area plan review, item number 7.
President, members of the EDA, during the last EDA meeting, there was discussion on kind of developing kind of a work plan for the small area plans that Commissioner Finneman had designed. So we sent out the link to the Dropbox and with the instructions of the EDA members were supposed to go through those and kind of figure out which ones are kind of leading out as ones that the EDA wants to spend more time with, kind of refining them, taking them those next levels of detail in there, and kind of getting those ones a little bit kind of more, again, to the front of the brain versus just kind of being in the mix there. So at this point, I guess if, I'd leave the discussion back to the EDA as the review was done at the EDA level. So just kind of having a discussion point of which of the small area plans, what are everybody's favorites, which ones want more work, and kind of at that point, just leave the discussion open to see where we go from here on the small area plans.
Can I throw in a thought at this point?
Absolutely.
The small area plans are this kind of shotgun approach. They fit into the category of judging downtown or making appraisal of existing facilities or developable land. It's sort of in all the assessment categories. So, it kind of moves consistently, and then parts of it fill all those holes. That's how I see it anyway. It's not in one category necessarily, but it could be considered one category, because it'd be nice to bring some of these up that seem to have a future near-term versus long-term, and some things that are part of other discussions that should probably come up. So that's how I'd prioritize them. That there's just some things that are active now that probably should begin their conversation, other things that aren't so active, and it could be a very long-term or a slow burn to get the discussion going. So there's some that seem to be on the current, the horizon out there, and some that don't seem to be on the horizon.
So which ones are you specifically talking about, the most current?
Well, I've got my mindset on it. It doesn't mean it's going to match anybody else's. It's either, just as an example, it's either a very good time now to start talking between the city and the school and the FLA organization about how they actually use that triangular piece of land down there, and how we really get committed, because there's a borderline crossing that could happen there, shared land usage. Or it's not a good time until after the election or after the levy is dealt with. So there I don't know how to push it down one category or the other, but it's a conversation that will take some time. There's at least 3 basic parties that should be involved in that conversation. And so that sort of thing could begin now as a discussion. Others like moving ahead on the Herrick property for the review that we're going to, at some point, hear a proposal to move ahead and do the county-city collaborative effort to get some judgment about costs. So they're easy enough to put drawings, or engineering to put drawings, or however to do schematics there that makes sense to move that dialogue forward. Some have been done in the past. Herrick had done a lot of engineering in the past around developing certain size industrial properties. There's just a whole lot of information on the table about that one. Maybe that pushes it to an early point, because it's I think easily, somebody can educate me if it's not defined. If what we're trying to get at is, here's essentially what you're talking about for property cost sales. And once you've done that, then I think you've got an idea that developers can hang on. And I'm still promoting another site that fits that category wonderfully well, and maybe is even easier to work with, or could be worked with as well. And that's the stuff that where the MnDOT owns, and then the city owns, and then a series of landowners own the in-between. And it's a clumsy piece of property, but it's a great piece of property. But maybe not as distant a horizon as the industrial property. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm bouncing on all these things that could be talked about. We talk about business parks, and yet, here comes a point where we've defined some things on the comp plan as mixed use. But maybe we really have to start looking at honestly defining and saving territories that seem to fit the bill for this versus let them be subject to too much more. The comp plan will control some of it. You know, it always has to come back through a process, but maybe the EDA has a say in saying, here's what's a good thing to move on. We're supposed to be an economic development authority. I'd like to see us understand our game better and start moving it down the line in terms of priorities. I will quiet down now.
All right.
I mean, I guess looking at the individual plans, do we have any ones that, you know, that there's, I mean, again, there's a lot there. I mean, there's a lot of detail here. There's a lot of options here. There's a lot of moving parts, you know, and, you know, trying to bring these forward. I mean, it is tough to kind of look at some of these when you're looking at, you know, potential multiple property owners, a lot of acquisition that goes into it, a lot of issues. But I mean, I guess in terms of these smaller plans, is there any ones that kind of come forward that we want to kind of take that next level look at, or?
Go ahead, Jim.
Which properties does the city already own? The old fire hall?
Land south of the YMCA,
Okay,
80-some acres there or more,
120, I think.
120.
south of the Y, that big piece, yeah.
And they own a piece of, I'm not sure what to call it, you know, the MnDOT to old city planning office.
And
Right in
Yeah,
the
97.
corner by the roundabout.
so wouldn't it make a lot of sense, because like you said, there are a lot of property owners involved in in some of these other ones. Has the whole property been sold?
It's on the, it's held right now.
It's held. For
prospects.
how much, do you know for how much, does anybody know for how much longer?
I have
Because that
not.
was talked about a long time ago.
Yeah, there's an extension, so it'll be.
So
past
then that
election.
one's pushed to the side anyhow. We have
Well, and the
nothing-
private developer will kind of define a specific notion there.
Right.
So I think
Trying to
we're,
separate things, categorize things a little bit in my brain.
I think, and Mark, jump in if I'm going offline with it, but I think what we have here are examples and tools to show that, hey, the city is looking to move forward, but some of them do have private, you know, ownership underneath it. But I think what we have is more, you know, we're looking for items and, you know, to start those conversations and to be able to put that on the website as, you know, these are some ideas out there that, you know, could do it. Can we contact the property owners? Yeah, sure, we could move forward with that, but I don't think the city is ever gonna get, you know, somebody to come in and say, hey, I wanna build something here, tell me what you need. I mean, that's,
No, and that's
you know,
what we
that ain't
need
gonna
to
happen.
decide, what we want, and then actively market it. That, we've talked about that for a long time. Go find somebody.
Right, go ahead, Chris.
President Wingham, members, just a recommendation. Some of these opportunities that Mark's had a little bit of time to do some pre-development planning for, might be low-hanging fruit. And so maybe what we do is we look for those properties that might be easier to undertake and not get hung up on all of them, because there's a lot of them here.
There are
A lot of really good opportunities, don't get me wrong, but maybe some of them are further along or ready to go a little bit quicker, and maybe we, based on our EDA's recommendation, we focus on those first, whatever those are, whatever we'd like to do.
And there's something to be really catalytic. I mean, if you took 2 properties downtown on the east side
Yeah.
and gave it a scenario, and if you took 3 and gave it a scenario, and the property values down there are shifting at this point in time, there might be a moment here to just get people aware of the fact that you need this much or just need this much to get something done. That could be really paying attention to downtown and trying to structure at least 1 or 2 storylines that say,
Yeah.
look what could happen.
Yeah.
Then we're more aware and others are possibly more aware, and maybe the idea of packaging a single building doesn't become as good as packaging 3 buildings. So that, some can just be
But
exciting.
has that road been gone down and a roadblock been run into?
The roadblock has always been money, the cost of the properties. That stopped people from continuing their discussion. But that story is changing. And so I think it could be, I did a schematic as part of the things we've done. It just, something hard to read, but it talked about just those things. If those were cleaned up and drawn a little nicer and easily understood, they could be schematics that represent two possible storylines downtown. And that might be a good move towards something. So some things can kick off stuff. If we're looking for business parks, we have actual territories we could look at specifically and start to focus on outlining them as the territory. And then there's some maybe pre-development things that could happen now for things such as the properties I've been talking, like Herrick's property and this other one that kind of compares to it. Those are the ones I'd push down first, essentially, now.
Well, I agree that with the new apartment building going up, Lighthouse Lofts, I think that 5 property development, if we can do something, make that a top priority with retail shops in there where people can walk out their door and go clothing shopping, shoe shopping, whatever, in those shops. So those are the ones you're talking about, that it's a matter of money?
And the 5 was at least one storyline, then there's a 3, and then there's a 2. And so those storylines can be brought forward, and in each case, there's either an immovable object that wouldn't move off the
Well, and
front street.
sometimes if you get a little something going,
Spark something.
it sparks something,
But
maybe.
It doesn't take much to put 3 storylines together, have them in a graphic, sensible situation so everybody can just at least have them available in the back of their minds, talk about them, make judgments, see if it actually allows us to go talk to ownership and say, how can we maneuver forward here?
And that would fit right into whatever number on our grand plan of the revitalization of downtown.
So I guess if I were just give it guidance, I'm happy to draw. And I'm happy to have it in front of people to debate. That's what I would like to see.
And just as we start going down this road, at the real estate development, the raw land development conference I was on a panel at, one of the developers there kind of spoke to these plans, and he said, as a board, he's like, it's great that the work is done. He said, however, some cities get too married to, like, this area is gonna be, an art loft with a cafe below it, and they don't necessarily always take into plan what the market wants. So he said, always be cognizant of the fact that you may have this really cool plan. However, if the market's not there, that's never gonna happen. So he's like, don't forego an actual real development for the fact that you're holding out for like an artist loft with, and that's the example he used, was like certain areas, since he was like, or you come into a planning commission and say, wasn't that supposed to be the artist loft section of town? And reality is, he's like, the market will never bring that to that part of town. He's like, and it's a great plan. However, he said, just be cognizant of what the market actually is gonna bear, as you go through this.
Absolutely. It'll be market-driven in the final analysis. This will all back off, but it's a guide, it's just any other guide would be. And it's not gonna get so specific as to say that it's gonna be restaurant A sitting right there at 2,000 square feet. It's gonna talk about the generalizations of movement, how we can work it. So, and it concedes immediately to market-driven forces.
Yeah, and then that was that was the one word of caution. He said, as groups start to go down these kind of small area plans, these really kind of pre-planning areas, he's like, he's seen some cities where they get really hung up on the very fine details of it. And he goes, those details are really cool in a plan, they make a great map. He said, however, market will never put those there, and you gotta basically be willing to let those go. And it sounds like this is more just general guide, but I think that falls in line with what, these developers were kind of saying during that conference.
It's like I took the Kraus Anderson property down there by the library and I said, man, you can pack it. And there can be all these different personalities. There could be this many that covers water management, covers parking, and covers the building square footage and takes care of things. And I divided it up according to my own taste, but they have their platted divisions as well. But it tells you absolutely a density that can be achieved. And it tells you these things can happen. And as long as you have a highly dense use and then a more relaxed use, you start to see the 2 bookends of the whole story, and you start to understand what you can do in between. So I think those things are just good movements for a city to understand.
All right. Ryan, I'm gonna try and build on this a little bit. Not talking specific area plan, but for downtown redevelopment, with Lighthouse Lofts, with rebuilding a Second Street, with things like that, is there other utility infrastructure things we should be looking at getting ready for, more redevelopment? Are there things that might need to be done that would spur along redevelopment of some of those structures downtown. And again, money, I think, is the biggest problem right now, trying to acquire those parcels for what the landowners need to get out of them or think they're worth, and then to tear all that down and build a structure on it. I just can't see it being economically feasible at this time, but sooner or later, that's gonna flip and it's gonna make it that. So I guess just throwing it back to you as you're aware of, you know, it's the oldest part of the city. I mean, what are we gonna need to do as a city to get that area ready?
Our sewer capacity is gonna eventually cap your development capacity. With the late changes that were proposed in the zoning, that obviously brings a lot more density to certain district of one's pipe service. You know, you basically got coming back down to Forest Road. And even with that, part of the 2019 project, well, when we obviously have the lines that crossed Centennial here, we'll be looking at those, because if we gotta upsize those, we might as well upsize them now prior to doing all the street work, because, you know, it's very expensive routes where that sanitary sewer line goes, right down, you know, through the business district, and then right down the middle of 61. And then we have another line just west of there, but eventually, you know, the city hasn't really undertaken a sewer capacity study at some points and actually got into all that stuff, but, you know, with that, that's eventually gonna be your cap on development, because the pipes are only so big. You know, those are original in the late 60s sizes, and, you know, obviously when you got west, you got bigger, and some of the flows were diverted around the downtown district, but, obviously with the latest zoning changes that were proposed, that's gonna really go hand in hand with sewer capacity. Your water main's looped, so, you know, you'll be able to fight off some of that. We have done some projects as long ago as 2007, and then with Cherrywood Point, did a large extension of 12-inch water main to help some of the loop-in and capacities in that area, but really it's gonna come down to sanitary sewer someday.
All right.
And I don't think the downtown story is too big and too far off. I think there are two building parcels, two ownership parcels that can fit a believable financial storyline in the marketplace. And so, you know, we can let it ride, or we could jump on saying there's something there that can move and not cause great consequence to all the utility needs and such, and doesn't demand that much, but is a chance to move something forward downtown. So I do think there's something believable in the storyline today, and then there's the bigger stories that will take longer and require more partnership.
Well, and I also with downtown redevelopment, like a parcel like this, what I look at is, you know, if we're gonna put a 5-story building there, you're gonna basically shut the view of the lake off for buildings on the other side. So do we recommend to the city a certain height limit on construction within a certain area so that, you know, as the other side of the street redevelops, that, you know, you can get a larger building on that side of it? Because the biggest asset obviously is the lake view and, you know, the park itself and the lake, but I would say more than anything, the lake view, and obviously that's why you got Lighthouse Lofts at such a tall building, but, you know, we can only get a certain amount of those before they block everybody else's view from the lake too.
It might be early to set any more criteria than we already have to allow it to be development specific, which means we're responding to a very specific idea, and if it's really a great idea, then it grabs its position in the story. I don't know that we have to impose anything at this point in time. We got some standards set, and let's just see what comes on board. I understand the air rights, and I understand something blocking somebody else's lake views, but then there's things that come first and things that come second. So development happens on its own. At any rate, I wouldn't, you know, push for any additional criteria from what we have right now.
Okay. Any other comments, thoughts? All right.
I guess to summarize, you know, next steps on this, I mean, do we wanna bring one forward a meeting to discuss, or like look at the city-owned ones, or do we wanna I guess I just, looking for a little bit of what the EDA wants to do with these plans.
Well, we were asking for input, and I'm assuming you didn't receive any.
Well, I mean, I figured, tonight was some of that input. I mean, it could just be, based on, some of the conversation that I'm kind of hearing downtown as a priority, city-owned parcels as a potential priority. So we could maybe get those ones reshuffled to the top of the deck and kind of come up with like a potential, here's a list of which ones we can work on, and then just bring one forward, as the agendas allow, and say, let's just have a discussion on what the downtown one looks like, and have a 15-minute discussion on that as part of a meeting, just to get some of these things kind of more refined, if that's an option, or, I guess I just, you look at some of these where, they were done last year, and they kind of sat backgrounded for a while, and then they're kind of coming back. I just don't want them to all of a sudden kind of get pushed to the back of the closet again, and, have to get we're kind of always restarting back from square one on these.
Well, I guess I'd like to also, kind of along with this, not the small area plan, but with the 120 acres that we have along headwaters, I think maybe it's time that the EDA kind of spearhead or, invest some money in, some layouts for that. Parceling it up, figure out, where we might like to see roads and, or, getting some of those sites shovel-ready. That's, I think, a great location for businesses, as well as along headwaters, we can still allow, retail development to grow in there. But it'd be nice to have a basic master plan, I guess, at that 120 acres, maybe, breaking it into an A, B, and a C development and start that rolling. Those 50,000 and, 150,000 square foot companies are looking for places too, data centers, other things like that. So I believe we can have both items going at once, small area plans for redevelopment, but, some larger parcels for, those 100, 200, 500 employee companies that might be looking for, very scenic location to go.
I think if you brought forward the one I did for that, I probably don't have the acreage correctly, but I brought home something that was gonna push the density there as well. So we have a drawing already, that if we brought that forward, we could really challenge that drawing and see if we couldn't find something that follows a schematic master plan of some sort, that at least to start to tell people
So
that
we don't have that.
I have a drawing in there, yes, of that territory.
That's in here? I
So
didn't see it.
what would that have been called?
I got it right here. I'll put it up. Can you put it on the screen? Just 1 second.
That was in your plans here?
Yeah, this one,
This one you're referring to?
yes.
Oh,
So-
I've got that, yeah.
That was an intention to start a conversation about where you split, how you split, what pieces are coming in, and how they should look or act. So there's a place to start a conversation, and you can take it from here and start to look at what's wrong, what's right about this drawing. It's always been my goal to put these in front of people that want to debate it.
One option, there was a discussion at the last council meeting, that a developer had come in and asked about some of the parcels on the south side here for a development he was potentially looking at, and the direction was bring this back to the EDA for input and discussion on this parcel. I could just package all that up and bring that forward. We were just doing back the historical work to kind of see what the original intent of these parcels were, back when Headwaters kind of developed out. So we're doing some of that historical analysis work right now. We could package this one up. It's kind of like the first one, small area plan in combination with what that all looks like as an option. That's an option to kind of bring a small area plan forward and, that Headwaters area.
Chris has got something to say.
President Winnick, if I may, this type of concept is exactly what I was thinking about when we were talking about the pre-development finance fund, to take it to that next level, to do that master plan for the area, have Ryan dig down a little bit and say, these are the costs of the utilities to serve a project like this. It might turn out that you do something completely different, but this is a good place to start, and I think it would be a really good applicant for the pre-development finance fund that the county CDA has available. So we'd love to partner with you on taking this to the next level, if this is something the EDA would be interested in.
All right.
I think sums it up.
It needs to be challenged though, because there's a lot of incorrect things there.
Yeah,
What do you
I mean,
consider a row house?
Well, it actually can be lots of things, but yeah, row house just, it's a simple idea of packing 8, 10, you know,
Side by side.
together, yes. It could be individual row houses, it could be twins, it could be a bunch of things. Again, I always intend to try and frighten people about density, see if that gets a reaction, you know, because you can always relax it and change its intensity.
well, I think, you know, we've got with the Headwaters Parkway, we've got a buffer area. We have to the north of that, some higher density housing. And so I think it's a natural transition to more of a business park, almost the whole thing. But I personally would like to see more of a retail-orientated front along Headwaters Parkway. And then the larger business pads more towards the back. I don't think we're gonna have a really good traffic flow, you know, having the large pads in between Headwaters Parkway and the homes behind them. I don't know if that flows the way I'd like to see it, but I think that's where we need to get a professional involved that, you know, has done these types of designs before. And I don't know what the actual elevations are over there, if we are dealing with much as
Well,
far as
I think
wetlands
this
or
would be a
anything goes.
great side project. It's not something that we can really talk, but assign, you know, Mark definitely should be involved because you definitely have done projects like this. But maybe pull in some other ideas and then have it presented again?
These can go through lots of iterations.
Yeah.
Very valid points relative to retail, whether that's the marketplace that'll fit. You're pushed back off of the parkway quite a bit with water management issues, but for the most part, it's a valid point, and exactly how this stratifies for density is all worth talking about as a group, so that then you can just let somebody know how you'd like to see it pushed from there.
Well, I think if you draw 2 or 3 of these and have them in there and then we discuss them, and
Sure.
I think that would be.
In a lot of ways, this reminds me of, if you're familiar with in Woodbury, where the Bielenberg Sports Center is, and Jerry's Foods and Summit Orthopedics. This to me is kind of that concept where you got St. Therese who built senior housing, and now you see all of the retail and healthcare coming because of that retail, and the rooftops are there now. So those are the kinds of things that I think with this pre-development finance fund, again, we can really help you get started and really kind of see it unfold and work together as a team to make this happen. It's a really cool concept. Great idea.
I'm seeing.
That, by the way, is on Radio Drive in Bielenberg, or not Bielenberg, but Hargis Parkway, if you're familiar with that area, down by the sports center.
Yeah, I'm thinking somewhere in here we need to have some kind of hospitality, hotel, some kind of Marriott product or something like that. Especially with all the sporting events we have, and people are traveling 40, 50 miles just to have a hotel room, so.
Well, we got, what is it, over 100 coming online here at Running Aces. So I don't know how that's going to affect the overall demand or capacity that.
I mean, just my experience from coming from California by the reservations and stuff like that, a lot of people just don't want to stay there with that kind of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Ambiance.
Yeah, you know, and I think some people are looking for suites, because you have these events that are 2 or 3 days. I think there's a real opportunity there for a lower end Marriott product, like a Spring Hill or something like that.
I think that this particular site and the Kraus-Anderson property should be looked at the same time. And between those 2 areas, I think you'll have a better sense about what should be positioned where.
What's the Kraus-Anderson property?
The bank that's
Bank.
vacated
Oh.
there right now, everything around it essentially.
Okay.
And so, if you look at them both at the same time, then a particular use, if it is hospitality, just say that was valid, hospitality moves into something that might be on their pads versus here, just because of its proximity to 61 and the rest. So I think they should both be looked at the same time. If we looked at both those at the same time, we really beat them up, we could come out with the next iteration. or varied iterations.
Yeah. So, Chris, as far as the development grant goes, how do we apply or qualify to get to that point?
President Winnick, it's a pretty simple process. There are probably 10 questions on the application, not very complicated. I'll certainly work with Dan to fill it out. You can actually apply for 2 grants if you want to. The maximum is $40,000 per city per year. And so if you wanted to do 2 smaller grants and do some high level at this point in time, that would be appropriate. We've got 2 funding pools. A small pool is for grants that are less than $10,000, and for every 20 cents that the city puts in, we'll match it with $1. The large pool is a dollar-to-dollar match, so anything over $10,000 is 1-to-1 match, but 20 cents to $1 for the smaller grants. And if you wanted to do 2 smaller ones, you could come up with 4,000, we come up with 20, and we could do both if you wanted to. Really simple process, and I approve those small pool applications myself with Barbara Dacey, my executive director. The larger applications over 10,000 go to the CDA board, and we can do that once a month when the board meets, so pretty simple process.
I just recommend then, if we're gonna bring anything forward, why don't we bring these 2 sites forward and put them on the agenda and work on them and make decisions about what should happen
With
next.
it downtown and that.
Either this and the Cross Anderson Landing combination or a downtown idea. I'm just gonna keep moving on plans on different properties that I think are on the forefront of at least setting the stage for like downtown. It does keep traveling south, the potential travels south, and the potential is still there to do something.
So interrupt you for one quick second. Just to backtrack to the grant, because we're halfway through the year already. We should probably at least get started on 1 grant, and then choose a site for a second grant as well. But I don't know, I think it would be beneficial for us to get on that list right away, because I don't know how much money that the county has available, but
President
I'd like
Winnick,
to get
we
something.
have $150,000 for this fiscal year, and we are going to be looking for $150,000 for next year. So I wouldn't encourage you to rush through it. Think it through a little bit. We've got 3 applications that we've received so far, totaling less than 30,000 of the 150. So we've got money left. So think it through a little bit, and we'll certainly work with you, knowing that you're going to be applying and coming in with some kind of an application. But and you can decide whether you want to come in for the small pool and not ask for over 10,000, and just for $2,000 of your own money, you can match. We'll match you 10,000 if you'd like to, or if you decide to go larger. And if this is, I don't know, Ryan, how much work you can do for that kind of money. That would be something to talk to the engineer about and find out what level of detail do you get, or what level are you looking for that 10,000 or 20,000, whatever you decide to come in with. So, but we do have plenty of resources at this point, and it's a brand new program. We just started it in March of this year, so we're just rolling it out right now, and it's been well received across the county. But there are resources available right now.
If you apply this year and it flows into next year, is it, are you capped? Once you go in this year, then everybody begins new next year, or can it flow through?
So the policies are $40,000 per city per fiscal year. So if you do 40,000 this year, you could come back next year for another 40 if you wanted to.
Well, it seems that what's hitting me here is the idea that if we're gonna try and at least approach grants this year, that anything that's grant worthy, we should talk about now.
Yeah.
And see if we can't bring the most worthy 1 or 2 forward. And do that before too long, so that would be the agenda items, I guess I would see it now.
Is our next meeting a workshop?
I'm not sure, Dan, is next meeting workshop, or
I believe it's a regular meeting, but we can go,
We could make
yeah,
it
they're kind of,
workshop.
they're kind of mingle back and forth. I mean, basically, if it's a regular
well,
meeting.
next one will be over the 4th of July, or will that be canceled?
I believe it's the 9th is the next, July 9th is the next meeting. Is it, I think it's a regular.
The second Monday is the 9th.
I mean, there's no reason we can't have both, too. Just, have a short meeting recess and go into a workshop afterwards.
Or just add it as a discussion item on the regular agenda too, so there's no action taken, it's just a discussion point. So I mean, there's ways to do it, to keep that ball moving forward.
Okay, so
All right,
I'll make my recommendations somehow to Dan about what the sites are, I think, are that fit this grant proposition. And that'll be my 2 cents worth, and we have drawings on at least 2 or 3 of the parcels that I'm thinking about right now, so a place to begin.
sounds good.
I appreciate that we can kind of lean on you because you've got the expertise and a lot of this just goes right over my head. And so thank you.
Well, the fact
For
that
your
you're
expertise.
doing it ahead of the conversation is refreshing.
All right,
Okay?
so I think we've covered number 8, your grant discussion. Definitely appreciate that. And so, go on to 9, the Downtown Business Redevelopment District. Dan, do you want to take us through what we have currently and?
Yeah, President, members of the EDA, this was brought forward again because back in 2016, their Highway 61 Commercial Incentive Program was adopted by the city of Forest Lake. Basically, it allows for properties located in MU1 downtown or MU2 general mixed-use districts to apply for redevelopment grants for tax abatement for certain projects that they undertake. This was kind of, when we launched the project, we had a few come forward. It's kind of, in the past couple of years, kind of like I said before, it's kind of got to the back burner. There has been, since it's been discussed at the last couple of EDA meetings, there's been a few inquiries that have come in just on, what projects qualify, what projects don't qualify. So we went back to the original kind of program materials, brought them back forward so we could have a discussion on them, answer any questions that EDA might have. So that way, as we start to kind of see these applications come forward, either at staff level or EDA level, we'd be able to kind of give that information out to residents or to business owners. Basically, what the program allows is that for exterior renovation projects, if they're over $40,000, a one-time tax abatement of $5,000 will be provided. This original policy had $30,000 available per year. But the work plan to kind of make it more realistic in terms of what we're seeing for demand, we actually have it, the goal for this year, we try to get 2 accomplished at $10,000, just so we can kind of get, I didn't want to go in at the full 30 and, come up short, kind of 10,000 seemed like a pretty attainable in 6 months, try to get 2 signed up. Basically, if it's in storm damage, insurance damage, that project is not going to be eligible. This is something that tries to encourage a property owner to kind of take on a renovation project to improve the look of downtown. If they're doing just strictly landscaping, stormwater, or other improvements to the site, we'll evaluate those on a case-by-case basis. So kind of depending upon the merits of the project, that determines if they're going to get funded or not. Also, if a demolition occurs in that district that exceeds 1,000 square feet, they would again qualify for the $5,000 in tax abatement. Again, subject to the same $30,000 cap for the total funding that's available for the project. Additionally, if that project is tax exempt, we do not allow for the tax abatement, or if they're behind in their current real estate taxes, we do not allow for the abatement. So they have to be current on real estate taxes and not tax exempt. Kind of additionally, if a developer comes forward with a project downtown, we do offer some additional a development fee reduction as a result of this. We also will plan on reducing building permit fees by 50%. And if they're doing a demolition, we'll reduce it 100% if the project is approved. Again, on that permitting vein, if they're coming forward, we will try to expedite those permits within 10 working days. Again, that's the goal of that program, is to kind of give them a leg up in terms of getting their permits approved and through. So if a business is interested, there is an application. This application is actually on the EDA's website. They can go down, download the application, submit it. The application is kind of goes, is it exterior, is it demolition, is it stormwater, landscape improvement? They're then supposed to provide a project description of what kind of project they're looking at, anticipated project costs with copies of the bids for the project, just so staff can get an idea of, is it, are they really over that $40,000 threshold? So we're looking at the bid costs in there. Basically, once the staff receives it, we'll review it. And according to the way this policy was written, staff does have the ability to, say, yeah, you qualify, or no, you don't qualify. Obviously, I think the intent would be if a project comes forward and it's approved, it gets brought forward to the EDA, so we know, EDA is aware that a project is going forward downtown. Typically, these things don't probably happen overnight. They do take a little bit of time from the start of when we first hear about it to when completion. So as these things kind of evolve, I'll bring them forward to the EDA so you can kind of say we've had 2 applications come forward. At this point, all I've kind of received is just some preliminary pings, nothing serious. There's no formal application from anybody in that district at this point. Just a few people wanting to get some information on the redevelopment plans or incentive programs for downtown. So if anything kind of goes that next level of, I'm just looking for information to, I'm kind of thinking about putting an application in, I'll bring that, those forward for EDA so you guys are aware of, what's going on in that development district. But with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. But again, this was just kind of brought forward so the EDA is kind of aware of some of the back end, information on the redevelopment incentives that are available for downtown. We'll also go through and just kind of looking through this, some of the dates on here, we'll just kind of freshen up the material so the dates are current. I see Aaron's name is still listed as some of the contacts, so we'll just make sure that the materials themselves are updated as well. So we're kind of presenting that, current set of documents, people coming forward on it. But with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or, if anybody has anything additional they want to add to that, I'd be happy to take any feedback on it as well.
What's the typical turnaround time on a building permit now?
At this point, I know they're digging out. I know we're probably a little bit beyond that 10-day mark. It's very much a fluid situation at this point. It just depends on the number of applications that are in. We do have a contract plan review going on right now as well. So we have staff doing plan review as well as the contractor doing plan review. And it depends on the number that are in queue and the number, so we'll have a number that are in there, and all of a sudden in 3 days, they may clear a slate of them that gets knocked off, so that the lead times go down. We may have some more complicated ones that come in that require some additional lead time. The building department is working on developing a list of kind of seeing where everything is, so we can kind of get more detail orientated to see, is it A, B, C, kind of bucketing them up in different buckets of, these ones should be done, within 3 days, these ones should be a little bit longer, these ones are a little bit longer. Some of that review also depends on, is it a complete application? Are we missing any types of, information on that application? If we are missing any information on that, sometimes those review times are hinged upon when we can get that information. So those kind of go into that different bucket group, so to speak. So we're not, always evaluating it out just on the total number that are in. So we are looking at this point, they will be working this week on getting an updated list so we can kind of keep those, what we have in the queue right now and how we're gonna address those moving forward.
I'm just wondering if if it's gonna be a real incentive for them, if it's 10 days now, that, to them, that probably doesn't mean anything, you know what I mean?
Well, back when we did that, the permitting time was taking considerably longer, so it was a
Yeah.
big deal then.
No, 10-day would be very nice to see. I think most people would be
Be okay with that.
surprised that, it would be that quick. I guess part of that question on that 10-day building permit turnaround is, how many of these, if somebody wants to put a new storefront on and they're gonna spend $50,000, whatever, how many of those actually have to go through the planning commission to get an approval before they can even start?
It's going to depend on the project, I can't, I think some of these get evaluated on a case-by-case basis, depending upon, what the work is going to do. If it's I would anticipate if it's more of a storefront, just fascia improvement, probably there's no historical standards they have to build up to, so I wouldn't assume those would have to go to planning commission, but if it's a fairly significant, building demo and rebuild, that probably would. But some of these are going to will be evaluated kind of on the full, what that project scope looks like. But we try to kind of come up with kind of general terms so we could kind of encompass as much possible work as we could in the downtown area.
Well, being on the EDA when we developed this, I think, we hit it fairly thorough at the time. I like the program. I guess my one suggestion for it at this point would be to have an end date, and that way the EDA can choose to renew it year by year or, every couple of years. But right now, if somebody looks at this incentive program, like, there's no incentive to do it now, because it's a program that's just kind of ongoing. So I do believe that it would be beneficial for the EDA to have, you know, this program is valid until whatever date.
So you want to create some kind of sense of urgency for them to,
Yeah, you know, just, I'm thinking about doing something, well, this
Yeah,
program is gonna
next
end in
fall
6
or-
months, maybe we get our application in or start talking about it first, so.
Gives us a chance to make adjustments should we need to from our end as well. So if there is some sort of year program with that.
Right, and without having an ending date on it, if we do choose to end it, you know, there's gonna be,
Why
for the
wouldn't
next
we
few
do that?
years, oh, you know, you give it, you know, so this way, we have a cutoff point and a future EDA can choose to extend that by a year or two or wherever without, you know, causing any changes to it, but I think an ending date would be helpful. Any other?
A question of staff, if I could. In the past, I had a bit of a support group for scanning in, putting type notes on it, and then putting it in a digital file. Is that plausible yet?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, we should be able to find some capacity to, it depends on the level of detail. I mean, you know, I mean, if they're,
The hardline drawings will be done, it's a matter of notes.
yeah, if it's just adding notes, if it's not adding a bunch of line changes, that's pretty straightforward, people, yeah, we should be able to do that. But if it's having to go through and, you know, ink everything up, that's more time
No,
intensive.
just notes added, that would be great, and then put it in the digital record, and then I get a hard copy to work with, and we're back to where we used to be.
I think we can figure that aspect out for you.
All right. Any other discussion on that topic? All right, let's move on to our Washington County updates.
President Winnick and members, just a really quick update for you. At the staff level, I've been exploring the possibility of applying for an EDA grant, an EPA grant this fall. And what that would do is, let's say the CDA on behalf of the county applies for $600,000. We could use that money to identify or do an inventory of sites that could potentially have some contamination or maybe suspected of having some contamination. And it would also allow us then to go in and do some more investigation on those sites to find out what is the level of contamination, or is there any at all. And then what we'd want to do is follow that up with another application to, another grant application to EPA perhaps next year, where we could actually go in and begin the cleanup work if we do identify sites. So that's just something I want to plant. When you're thinking about these small areas, you may or may not have any contamination, but if we had some resources to at least do the phase 1 or phase 2 investigations, we could find out if there were any sites that were contaminated, and then we would certainly be able to work with you with grant funds to help clean up those sites as we identify them. So I just wanted to let you think about that a little bit as we're talking about some of these small areas and potentially some redevelopment grant opportunities coming forward. So that's all I've got. I'll certainly answer any questions if you have any.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Chris? All right. I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
And move we adjourn.
Do we have a second? Second. All those in favor? Aye.